type conversion. So we have seen examples of type conversion already. So type conversion happens automatically in most cases because there are built-in converters that are used by the framework. So these converters, built-in converters, are used in where type conversion is required. So we have seen examples of request param, path param, and request header. So anytime there need to be a conversion, this built-in converter will be used. Okay. There is also other converter that is actually used for request body and response body, HTTP entity and response entity. What it means is that if there is a contents coming from HTTP request body, that will be converted to whatever format you want. For example, you can convert to XML or JSON and things like that. Again, we're going to actually see examples of request body, response body later on in the hands-on lab. Can declare annotation-based conversion rules. So number format, date time format. So these are kind of customized conversion format that you can specify, conversion rules that you can specify. Okay. So number format, maybe you could actually specify, I want to have a decimal of the 2 or something like that. You can certainly plug in custom converters, and we're going to actually take a look at the how we can plug in custom converters in a different hands-on lab when we deal with the form submission. Okay, so handler method directly creates a HTTP response. So there are two different ways that you can send back the response. One is view selection, and that is an example we have seen so far. You can select a view by specifying a string or model view controller model and view object, or even void type. And in that case, view will be selected, and view resolver will actually get the JSP page to display. However, in some cases that you want to send back the response directly to the client, okay, instead of view selection, and that's what we are going to see here. And this is typically used when you want to send back the data, like XML data or JSON data. We're going to actually talk about these things in a bit more detail when we cover Spring MVC REST programming tomorrow. But you have two different ways to send back the HTTP response directly. Option one is by using response body, and the other one is using HTTP entity and with some kind of generic type. And this is a lot more fine-grained. Here, response body, you can just specify the contents that will be sent back in the HTTP response body. But if you want to even actually have a fine-grained control in terms of setting the new header, like adding a new header or things like that, then you can use HTTP entity or response entity. So let's see an example. Option one. So this is how you can use response body, and then basically you're setting the body part of the response. You don't control the headers. Okay. So if a method is annotated with response body, the return type, the string in the example below is written to the response body, and there is no view selection required. So I specify response body as a return type. The annotation for the method. And in this case, this string response body, this string will be sent back to the client directly. Okay, and there is no view selection required. HTTP entity is, as I said, give you a more fine-grained control. For example, you can set the header, and you can add a header and things like that. So let's see an example. So here we are returning response entity of type of string, and here we can actually get the new HTTP headers, and we can set the content type, and then we can create the response entity object with a string, and this is the setting the contents, and this is setting the response status to 100, and you're basically setting headers. So here I'm setting the headers, and I'm also setting the status. I'm also setting the contents. So if you want to have complete control in terms of what gets returned to the client, including headers, you want to use response entity. Or if you want to just set the contents of response body, then you use response body annotation like this. This is probably a bit more straight, easier to deal with. Okay. Okay, so that is the response body and response, the HTTP entity and response entity. Again, we're going to actually take a look at these things in a bit more detail later on. Okay, interceptor. So the concept interceptor is nothing really new in any frameworks, right? So what do interceptors do? Interceptors are useful when you want to apply specific functionality to a certain set of requests. For example, if you want to add authentication or authorization, logging, accessibility transformation, or changing headers, and all those things could be done in the interceptors. So interceptors will actually intercept incoming HTTP request, and you do whatever you want to do, such as authentication and authorization and logging, whatever, and then it will pass the request to your controller. And once the controller is done with the handling, then it will send back the response. That response will be again intercepted by this interceptor. Again, you can do whatever you want. So in order to implement interceptor, you have to implement handler interceptor interface, or you can just extend handler interceptor adapter utility class. Okay, so handler interceptor adapter class already implemented the methods of handler interceptor interface. It basically contains a dummy empty method implementation. So those two methods are prehandle and posthandle. And prehandle actually returns Boolean. So if it returns true, then the request will be forwarded to the next in the chain, interceptor chain, and eventually it will be handled by the controller. If you return false, that means no more forwarding to the next in the chain. So when you return false, basically dispatcher servlet of the Spring framework assumes the interceptor has already dealt with the response itself. Okay. And post handle is returning void because there is nothing to forward to, basically. So in order to implement interceptor, you have to write the interceptor code first, and then you have to configure that interceptor. So let's see an example. So this is a logging interceptor, so very simple interceptor. So what we want to do is we want to log a message when the HTTP request comes in, and then when the response goes back to the client, we want to also log the message. So this interceptor extends adapter handler interceptor adapter utility class. And here we have a logger object, and then we have a prehandle which receive request and response object and handler as well. Okay, so here we're gonna just log it, and then we are gonna just return true. So it will be forwarded to the next in the chain. And post handle, we just log the message. That's all. It's pretty straightforward interceptor. Now, how you configure interceptor? So this is an example of the custom configuration. So in order to custom configure your web MVC application, basically you are going to either extend web MVC configure adapter, or you can create an object of it. So this is the the configuration of web MVC configure adapter, and you're going to create a brand new web MVC configure adapter. Inside, you are going to override add interceptors method, and it's going to receive interceptor registry object, and basically you're going to call add interceptor method of that registry object of your interceptor. So we are in this case registering two interceptors. One is a logging interceptor that we just saw, and we're going to take a look at elapsed time interceptor, the example in the hands-on lab. Okay, you can also specify the path. So you can also add path patterns through which interceptor gets applied when you are when you're adding the interceptor. So you can actually call add path param, path 1, path 2. What it means is that the interceptor will be applied only when the URL have these patterns. Okay, if the URL doesn't have these patterns, then those interceptors will not be applied. So in this case, it will be applied for all URLs. Okay, so let's take a look at the exercise 3. So interceptor 3, so here we are going to deal with 2 interceptors, logging interceptors and elapsed time interceptors. So logging interceptors is basically logging things to the console. Elapsed time interceptor is basically we want to measure how long the controller method gets executed. So basically we are going to actually get the time when the request comes in, and then when the response is sent back, we just measure the duration. That's basically what this is all about. So let's actually run this guy first. So here, let's run this interceptor. First of all, let's stop it and run as and Java application and the main application. Okay, so it's up and running. So let's go to here 8080. Okay, so the JPassion.com, and this is lab time. So here, if you take a look at the console, you should be able to actually see logging message. Let's actually take a look at the what logging message look like. Oh, so it should have a logging interceptor. Let me see whether we have that. Oh, here I'm actually looking at the wrong place. So yeah, so this is the I was looking for. Okay, logging interceptor, and again, so logging interceptor prehandle is entered, and elapsed time interceptor prehandle, elapsed time post handle, then logging interceptor post handle, and yeah, so that's basically what we are looking for. And if you take a look at the code, so this is elapsed time interceptor code. So here basically, you provide prehandle, and we get the current startup time, and we save it into request scope object. Okay, so basically the request scope object is coming from HTTP Servlet request object here, right? So again, that gets created by the framework and given to us, and we just save it. This key value pair, startup time, and the actual startup time, and then post handle. We are going to get the value of startup time because this request scope object should still have it. Okay, and then we just kind of subtract the end time, subtract the startup time from the end time. Okay, so you get the end time, and then that is basically the value. And here we are just using model and view object, and then we are just adding as a model attribute, and we are going to display the handling time in the view page. Okay, this is logging interceptor, which I showed you in the code, so nothing really fancy about this. And this is Java configuration, so this is where you need to configure. Okay, so basically add interceptors. Oh, so this is the code that you have to have, right? Okay, so here we are receiving interceptor registry, and then we add logging interceptor and elapsed time interceptor. Okay, controller class, there is nothing new here. This is pretty much the same controller class that we have seen before. Okay. All right, so for your own exercise, add another interceptor as following. Detect the context of incoming request using getContextPath of HTTP Servlet request class, okay, and display them in the resulting page. It's pretty straightforward exercise. So I'm going to give you guys about 12 minutes to do exercise 3.